Welcome to the Circle of M. I am your host, Marcus Smith II. Man, we are in Vail, Colorado. We are in the mountains, y'all. And I am joined by my good friend, Chris Borland. I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. And we also have Laura Tucker. How are you guys doing today? Well, first off, on the show, we always start off with, how we're feeling, because I know in therapy, we would always kind of like go around the room and ask how we're feeling. So I'll start with you, Chris, first, and I'll go to Laura. So how are you feeling today, bro?
Excited to be on the podcast. Thank you for having me.
Man, appreciate it.
Feeling a little bit tired. We had like a great, interesting, deep, productive day. And it's inspiring and refreshing in ways, but also a little draining. So a little tired from this morning.
Okay. So what about you, Laura?
Yeah, I feel a little bit of that same thing, but also just really fulfilled, just getting to do this work and have this experience with you guys, and I'm excited to be here.
Man, I'm excited to be here too, man. Just, being able to have the camaraderie that we do have together and be able to do this together to tackle, mental health in a way that we can push for like what we know to be true. But I want to start off first. Anybody can answer this first question. For me, like, mental health means a lot, but I want people to know like what mental health means to you guys. So I wanted to ask, man, what does mental health mean to you?
Yeah, I think, and coming from a background where mental health wasn't important or focused on, or feelings weren't talked about, mental health is everything. It informs your life, your quality of life, your relationships. I came to realize that later in life, in my 20s, but I think it's enriched my life. It's opened a lot of new doors. I've probably strengthened relationships that I didn't attend to in the past, and then formed new ones with people that are on a similar journey.
Man, so like people don't really know your story. And I commend you for, in 2014, we were drafted together and you were drafted by the 49ers, but you took a different route. You walked away from the game. Do you want to talk a little bit about that process and you walking away, starting that journey and that process?
Well, football is a small fraternity. You and I were teammates at the Senior Bowl for a week, spent every day together.
Yeah.
In meetings on the practice field, and just reconnected this week. So yeah, we were together in Mobile in January of 2014. I was drafted in the third round by the 49ers that year. Third rounder's spot on the team is pretty secure, but I was competing for a starting position. Navarro Bowman, all-pro linebacker, our starter, was out for that year, and I was competing with a 7-year vet, Michael Wilhoit, and thought I had a chance to start. We're fighting in camp to, make the coaches agree.
Yeah.
And I was concussed in camp. This is why I was, trying to compete with Mike for that spot.
So you had a concussion in camp?
I did. Yeah, I think week 2 or 3. Nothing uncommon for a middle linebacker. I was fitting a B-gap lead against our Big Will, our 290-pound fullback that was a converted defensive tackle. And I was a thumper. I knew my role going in. I was run stopping, first and second down, middle linebacker. And I played at 5'11", 240, 245. So, 290 is a lot to take on in the hole. And, Will and I just met, and you know what it's like. See stars, a little dizzy. Didn't report it. So continued practice. Didn't feel like I could report it. So I didn't report that concussion. My spot on the team was secure. They're not going to draft someone in the third round and you won't make the team. But I was anxious about starting, making an impact right away, and thought if I report this and sit out, this was our third preseason game, which is the trial run for the season. I can't miss that game. Right. If Mike plays in that game, he starts. And he was ahead of me during camp. So I played through it, played the rest of the preseason. That next game, the week I was concussed, I played my best game yet. Had a pick 6, had 8 or 10 tackles, Um, and the season for me then went well. Mike did earn the starting spot. I was playing really well on special teams. Was special teams player of the week a couple times. And then 6 or 7 games into the season, Patrick Willis went down with an injury. So I went in and started the rest of the year. But to pace it back a little bit, when I, hit Will and got concussed, and there's that reality of this is going to be my norm. This is what it's going to take to meet my goals in the NFL. What does this look like long term? I wanted to play for 10 plus years. I had lofty goals of being a Hall of Famer. And I was also kind of both vaguely aware and willfully ignorant of the growing concern of brain damage for players.
Right.
So I'd heard the acronym CTE. I didn't know what it stood for. We would joke sometimes in college.
Like, we would definitely joke
like,
too.
I can't find my keys. The CTE's kicking in. Ha 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 ha. But I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it stood for. And I thought guys like Junior Seau and Mike Webster, who was the first case and is a Wisconsin alum, I thought they were the outliers. Played 16 years or 20 years, maybe took steroids, had mental illness. I thought, okay, there's a handful of those guys. But I spent the bulk of my rookie season looking into the research. I mean, it started as simple as a Google search, what does CTE stand for? And towards the middle, and definitely by the end of the season, I was reading scientific articles, reaching out to researchers. And what I came to find is that there's a lot of nameless, faceless guys that played briefly, not many years in the league, or maybe just college, or in some cases just high school, that had a significant pathology upon autopsy. And it made me reflect more honestly on my past. I was knocked out in 8th grade for almost 2 minutes, was diagnosed with a brain contusion at that time. Had a CT scan, went to the hospital. 2 years later, knocked out again playing football. So, if I was born 10 years later, they might have pulled me from contact sports after that injury in 10th grade. But this was 2006, 2007. So I did sit out a week in the second case and just went back to playing. Yeah. And, being a smaller guy, not heavily recruited, I've always had that chip on my shoulder. Like I always had to prove myself. And so I played through, I never missed. I played 49 of 52 games at Wisconsin, didn't miss practice, played through concussions, pulls, strains, tears. So I knew the physical toll, but that whole rookie season, I was learning more and more about the potential mental toll.
Right. Wow. Man, I commend you for being vulnerable and actually speaking about that. And I think that you actually taking that step and that leap forward to walk away or, to do something that not a lot of people do, And I know I was looking at it and I couldn't fathom it at that point in time, but I just feel like it did kind of put a light bulb in my head too as well. And I think, as, athletes and human beings, I feel like, sometimes we have to do what's best for us in that situation. And that's what you did.
Yeah, and it really was personal. Had I not had those 2 injuries or had I, not been a 4-year starter in college, maybe I continue to play. But I was already having, I would see stars often, lots of fitting a fullback or making a tackle, get my bell rung pretty easily. Yeah. And so to me, I hope it's proactive. I hope, my injuries and time playing doesn't catch up with me. But I didn't make the decision to be a flag bearer for a cause or to make a statement. I just wanted to, I just didn't want to get brain damage. Right. I realized really quickly, I quit in March. I thought it might have been a story on ESPN for a day. I was on Face the Nation the next week, CBS This Morning the next week. All of a sudden talking to Congressman Patrick Kennedy and the former chief of staff, vice chief of staff during the Iraq War. And it's a year ago I was a college football player, and now I'm meeting with, these people, and was being pulled in so many directions. The NFL and NCAA and Department of Defense. There are a lot of reasons they don't want some of this information out there. And I felt that pressure when I was 24.
Yeah.
So that the 6 months after quitting was just one stressful thing after another. I always thought, like, okay, I'll commit to this and I'll do this, and then I'm moving on with my life. And 7 years later, and I'm still pulled to some of these causes.
Right.
You know, as early as that year, and certainly now, trying to find a way to be completely truthful, but also channel my story, the information, the problem of players post-career, of veterans post-combat, into something constructive.
Man, duh, that's dope. I really I really feel that, you know, just speaking to you. And I want to go to you, Laura, because Laura, you are a therapist and you do work in this field and in the mental health arena. What brought you to the mental health space and just, you know, wanting to work with athletes and guys, you know, who deal with some of the stuff that he talked about, deal with some of the stuff that I talked about? What brought you to this?
So I've really gotten to mental health from some of my own, you know, past experiences, and I was really big into yoga, and yoga kind of served as one of the most effective therapies for me, along with talk therapy as well. But I wanted to find a way to kind of combine the two, and that was my initial kind of jump into mental health. And then once I came out here to APN, it was one of those things that kind of, I'd always wanted to work with athletes. I'd always wanted to teach yoga for athletes. And then, you know, the universe has that way of kind of guiding us, and you know, working with this athlete program is something that just all of a sudden it happened, and completely fell in love with it, fell in love with the process, fell in love with the purpose of why we're doing this. Right. And I think, you know, this athlete population is so misunderstood. You know, people look at you guys, oh, you know, you were a draft pick, you made it to the NFL, you must have it all together. Right. You know, I can Google how much money you make. You must have made all that, and how could you have any issues? You know, when you have all this money. And I just think it's so misunderstood, and so, you know, and you guys face so many different challenges that the normal, I don't want to say normal, but the, you know, an everyday person, and a non-elite athlete, doesn't really face. Yeah. And so there's so many different challenges, and I think there's a different skill set for, and you know, especially when it comes to brain injury, it's a heavy one. Yeah. It's a really heavy one. And so, yeah, I've just become so passionate about this, and helping, you know, guys just kind of adjust and adapt to that transition back into life, and then hopefully, you know, taking that proactive step and learning some of these skills throughout the entire process. Yeah.
In navigating, like even with me, it was like, you know, I came to APN, I got the healing, and I'm still getting healing, because obviously we know that it's like an everyday journey. It's not something that just goes away, whether it's, you know, us dealing with anxiety, depression, we're dealing with some form of PTSD, or if we're dealing with, you know, if it has anything to do with brain-wise, right? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times that, I was telling you earlier, like it scares the heck out of me, right? Yeah. To just even think about that. Like in your journey, like as you're coexisting with us in the journey and talking to us, did you like find like a sense of like love for athletes and what we do, or like a different perspective of us, like before, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Because before, like if you're just a fan, right, of the sport, it's like, okay, I'm a fan of the sport, but I don't really know the athlete. But once you got to know us, did your perspective change, or was it the same? Like,
no, my perspective changed, and you know, seeing the essence of each individual and the struggles that they go through, because it's not easy to make it to the NFL. Yeah. It's not something that just falls in your lap. And so just loved seeing the unique journey that each person takes. And also, I watch sports so differently now. My perspective when I'm just watching it is completely different. And even, this year watching preseason games, it's like, I feel that anxiety.
Right.
I feel it, the guy that's out there the first time and gets hurt immediately. And it's just heartbreaking because I now know, before it was kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but I guess there's more of a human component to it now.
Yeah.
Than I think a lot of people as fans kind of see guys in a dehumanizing way of, they're just another player. Here's someone else to come take his spot because the game never stops.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone gets hurt and it keeps going. And now, I can put myself, I'm not an NFL player. I've never played in the NFL. It's a big surprise.
Yeah.
But I can put myself in someone else's shoes and just feel that pain. And so it's a little harder to watch now.
Yeah. We was talking about it, and I haven't been watching it as much, but I do remember when I first got out of the league, I got cut, but it was like the best camp that I ever had, right? This was after I actually seeked the help, and I was actually felt like I was going uphill. Got cut, and I remember just being envious of the game and watching people out there that I know that I could beat or stuff like that. It was like, man, I should be out there, right? But when I was talking to you, Chris, you had a different perspective. It's like you still had the perspective of once you were done, it was you went to speak and you went to you was actually, as soon as you got finished, you was doing the work. You really immersed yourself in that. Do you want to talk a little bit about you going to speak and you finding the different things out that you found?
Sure. Yeah. I had a unique exodus from the NFL. I left on my own terms. And I didn't have a period of time where it was, hey, what am I going to do? It was out of the fire and into the frying pan. I went from playing in the league to advocating on one of the most contentious issues surrounding football.
And see, I want people to hear that too, because every situation is not the same, right? So
yeah, no, mine was unique in its own way, but every player's path to, in, and from the NFL is different. And I agree with Laura. The touch point for most people with pro football is just an image on a screen, and it's these nameless, faceless guys that just entertain me, and I'll turn the channel if there's an injury, and whatever happens after, who cares? There's another game on.
Yeah.
Really that first year, 2015 to 2016, doing advocacy, and I've done a lot since. I met and interacted with hundreds, maybe as many as 1,000 former NFL players, and I saw what their lives were like later and the struggles they faced. And navigating that transition is really a lifelong journey for a lot of these guys and their families. Injury, transition, brain injury doesn't just happen to you. It affects and ripples through your family, your friends, your work life. In a sense, it affirmed my decision. Not something I'm excited about, because there's a lot of players facing, and men facing, a lot of challenge. For that reason, it was a clean split for me from football. I couldn't get entertainment from it.
It was like you gave it all you had out there and you cut it off, and it's like, all right, now I'm on to this.
Yeah, and it's something I think, I got to learn that I could be the best in the world.
Yeah.
I was a Pro Bowl alternate as a rookie. I never played against a guy I didn't think I could beat. I'd get run over sometimes or miss a tackle, but I belonged, and I found out what my ceiling was. I think a lot of guys are haunted by things didn't work out like they envisioned. And I could have made it, or if this would have happened, and I didn't have that. I was satisfied. Right. And would have loved to play longer, but I don't miss playing. I don't think about, what my career would have been like. I count it as a win. And as hard as speaking out was, and as reluctant as I was to do it, know that I helped a few people.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty much at peace with it.
Yeah. That's a good place to be. And I think for all of us athletes, we want to get to that place. We want to actually be at peace with, the sport. And I think you could hear it yesterday when we had the meeting. Everyone has like a distaste because at the end of the day, like a lot of people didn't get done when they were ready. Now, Laura, I know you talk to a lot of NFL guys, and guys that come through, are most of the guys that you talk to, are they, done before they, get ready? And then, do you see it a lot? And how do you help them combat that? You know what I mean?
I see that a whole lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably the majority of guys that I've worked with, it's, they leave not on their own accord.
Yeah.
Or, kind of similar situations and just, like you were saying, that regret, or it could have been better, or I should have been better. And so, yeah, I see a lot of that. And it's a huge loss. You're losing your entire lifestyle. And so just working on the grief of that, it's kind of no different than losing a loved one or losing a long-term relationship, because that's what it is.
Right.
For you guys, football was a lifetime, a long-term relationship.
Right.
For so many guys, this was, my number one love was football. I loved football. I loved the sport. I loved the camaraderie that it brought me. And then all of a sudden one day, it's over. And when it's not our choice, there's this emptiness that can just be left there. And then, like you were saying, seeing other guys play and, I should be out there. I know I could do better, or whatever it may be.
So I think what I wanted to go to next was the grieving process and what that looks like, right, in your own personal experience. Mm-hmm. Like, because the way I look at it is like, I wasn't able to feel the freeness and be free until I grieved in the right way. And then I could actually start taking the steps to becoming what I am doing now. In your process, in your own experience, what did that look like for you?
With grief, like you said, it's something we have to experience.
Right.
How I say, we have to feel it. We have to allow ourselves to have those emotions. And what that process looks like is different for everyone.
Right.
For some people it might take a couple months. For some people it might take a year. For some people it might be that 10-year, a 10-year journey. But first is recognizing it.
Right.
That awareness piece. If I have to recognize that here's something that I lost. Again, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a career, whether it's memory or cognitive functioning, there's still some grieving around that too when we're looking at head trauma. Recognizing what it is and moving towards that acceptance.
Yeah.
With grief, we can look at the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grieving, and that, first one's denial. And that stage can last who knows how long.
Right.
And then anger, because that's once we start to kind of work toward, we recognize that it's there, and then we get pissed off of it.
Yeah.
Which is completely valid.
Yeah.
And then that bargaining of, how can I change this? I'm going to do anything that I possibly can to not make this a reality. Right. And then that acceptance starts to sink in a little more, and that can lead to some depression of, I don't know how I'm going to go on.
Right.
Here's my reality. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then working towards acceptance. And I think allowing ourselves to go through that process, and that's something I work on a lot with the guys that come through here, and just allowing that process, because I think especially for men, you're told you can't feel this way, you can't have feelings. Yeah. Boys don't cry. Yeah. So many men are taught that from the beginning, and that gets ingrained.
Yeah. Man, so one of the things that you said, Chris, that gave me like joy, and I'm not saying it's just because it's on camera, but I'm being real, was that you said there's hope, and I felt real joy when I got that, and this is why we came together, and that's what I want to start talking about next is, the advocacy of what we're doing now, for, All Points Lodge, APN, to continue to combat this mental health and try to get, more people the help that they solely desire. So, what does hope look like? What does that feel like to us? You know what I mean? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, in defining the challenges that former players face, it can feel bleak.
Yeah.
And I think players often feel alone. 350 million people in America, about 20,000 living former NFL players. Who relates to you? Like, you don't bump into people that understand your unique challenges. There's the fear of brain trauma.
Yeah.
Being here this week, a lot of other things I've experienced gives me a lot of hope. I think the transition's difficult, but you don't have to do it alone. I think now there's a little bit less stigma around talking openly about mental health for athletes.
Yeah.
And you get to go through that experience and explore things that might help with people that know exactly what you've been through.
Wow.
And, when we sit in group sessions and talk, you just hear, see a lot of head nods and and you don't get that in our everyday lives.
Nope.
Even your loved ones, parents, wives, kids, it's not about how much they care about you. It's about understanding what you're going through.
Yeah.
And they can't. So
Right.
we have to do it together.
Yeah.
And for all of the, terrible things going on in the world, like, there's incredible breakthroughs in neuroscience the last 15, 25 years.
Yeah.
There's modalities that might help.
Yeah.
It certainly would be worth exploring.
Yeah.
And I think together, as we go through those things, there's strength in numbers. It is a brotherhood. You bump into a former football player and you can relate to him in a second.
Right.
We all know what week 3 of camp feels like. We all know what our body feels like in November. We all know the challenge of transition.
Right.
So I think we'll need each other. And I'm glad that there's a space at APN where that's happening.
Man, this is a brotherhood. It's just like the locker room. Like, once we actually get back with each other, it's almost like we never left the locker room. But now it's in a different aspect, whereas it doesn't feel so on edge and tight. It's like a release instead. So, Laura, I wanted to ask you, like, what does hope look like for you, and how do we continue to, like, assert ourselves into, like, the athlete space and try to understand, you know what I'm saying? Because I know a lot of athletes, they feel comfortable talking to you, and I think that's very commendable. And like, I think it's a great thing, because if we don't have a voice, then we won't say anything, right? And if we don't say anything, then we have situations that we hear about we're not going to discuss anymore. But what does hope look like?
I mean, I think kind of on this same note, to me, hope looks like reconnecting this brotherhood. Yeah. And I think that's just part of the magic that happens here, is when we get a group of guys together, and on average we have, about 5 to 10 at a time, and just seeing the connections that are made, because this process, again, mental health or it's hard to kind of separate the two, dealing with head trauma, it feels so alone. And like you said, there's 20,000 people is not a lot of people. I mean, that's a small portion of a stadium. Right. And so there's not many people that you can relate to. So again, hope to me is coming back together as athletes, connecting, realizing that, oh, hey, I'm not alone. Yeah. this guy that I played with, or this guy, you know, he's a little bit older than me, but I studied his films. You know, he's dealing with some of these same things. It again, it feels less lonely, and that, you know, as humans we desire connection. Yeah. And then again, seeing guys on the other side of it, right. You know, seeing guys that have really been in these deep dark places and coming on the other side of it, and that's, you know, the beauty of, I think, what we're trying to create here in this athlete advisory board of, you know, hey, yeah, I've been there, and now, you know, I found my purpose. Exactly. Found my purpose advocating, creating podcasts, talking with groups of people. Right. And, you know, if I, you know, as a guy fresh out of the league, see you and, oh, look what he's done, and he can come out of this okay. Yeah. You know,
that's how I feel too. That's kind of what both of you said. What hope feels like, what it looks like. It starts with us, you know, doing the work. Obviously, we're doing the work together, and that's what builds, you know, a great, quote unquote, championship team. You can't do it alone. You have to do it together. So that's where I think we are now, and I'm glad that you guys came on the podcast to share your your stories, and, you know, really show people like, hey, there is hope, and there is, you know, a place where you can actually go to get help. You can talk to a therapist. You can do meditation, yoga, whatever it may be. I think for the Circle of M, our thing is we want to be able to be a resource and not persuade you in any way, but like learn from our perspective and what we deal with, and maybe it can change your perspective of, you know, how you think about mental health and you actually getting the help. So I can't thank you guys enough. Is there any last comments that you guys want to say, talk about, that you want to give the viewers?
I'll just say it's great what you're doing. Not many things like it. I love the way the podcast is set up, and I hope there's many more episodes, many more people see it.
Man, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and I see that. It's amazing seeing the journey that you're on, and so many people can benefit. We need more.
Man.
More of these conversations.
Don't make me blush. But no, man, you guys, this has been amazing. As you all know, we're doing this for the people, for athletes, for the generation that we come up in. You guys, you're watching the Circle of M, and we are out.